Let's talk about ballet versus Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Of course, when I say that, the differences are pretty obvious. They're completely different movement style, they're completely different art forms, they're not even the same in the realm of the same thing. However, I want to talk to you about the similarities that I found because I've practiced both quite extensively. So I've invested a lot of time into ballet. I started ballet actually at 22, which is not typical. So I started as an adult, and so I learned it from a very cerebral perspective as an adult. And then I started Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in my 30s at 30, and spent a lot of time trying to figure out Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and other grappling art forms as well. So I found that the two movement disciplines actually feed into each other and helped, having done one helped me figure out the other faster. So I want to share that with you. But first, I want to tell you about my background, which is my original obsession, which was track and field. So I started track when I was probably in 8th grade. And that was my obsession throughout into my early 20s. When I got to college, University of Miami, I started running track on a club team and found my people in Miami and did some coaching, etc. So like I really took track quite seriously, and I participated in a lot of track meets and coaching different kids and running and hurdles. So I've put a lot of effort into figuring out how to run faster and how to help other people run faster. And what fascinated me there was that you have no external factors. It's really the races, you have to run as fast as possible for a given distance. That's it. There's not a lot of necessarily technique involved, but there's a lot of conditioning, mindset, strength training. Those are the types of things that you have to put in. So in theory, the effort that you put in will directly translate into you getting better, right? Because there's not necessarily a lot of technical aspects to, you have to just run around a track for a 400-meter race, do it as fast as possible, and do it faster than everybody else, and you win. So I liked that it was so straightforward. And then, the factors that I had control over were, again, my conditioning, my strength training, my mindset, just literally hanging in there when everything feels like, you can't move anymore, and you got to keep going and you got to keep running, as still trying to run as fast as possible, right? So there was a huge mindset factor in there. However, I didn't realize that I actually could improve my running technique as well. So running technique, for some reason, was never touched upon in any of my years of running track with coaches. So it was kind of like, you run how you run. Now let's get you to run faster, right? Nobody actually addressed how you run. But the interesting thing that I've started to realize, which ultimately drove me to getting a PhD in kinesiology, was that your biomechanics matter a ton. And if you watch people who are good at running or at anything, right? But at running specifically, let's talk about running specifically. If you watch a track meet, all the runners pretty much run the same. That is fascinating to me, because it's like, while we all start out, we may all run differently, right? Like some of us land on our heels, some of us land on our toes, some of us have our, head here, some of us are like it. We all have sort of quirks in the way we run. And then you look at the way the professionals run. You look at a 400-meter race. They are all running really smoothly, really efficiently, and their running style and the way they strike the ground and the way they hold their heads, it's all pretty much the same. And so it's kind of like through years of trying to get faster and putting in time in the weight room and putting in conditioning time and just literal practice, they've also developed a super efficient running style, a super efficient technique that allows them to get the most out of their effort, because they're putting in a ton of effort to run around the track for a lap, right? That 400-meter race is so damn hard. Because it's like the last 100 meters is nearly impossible because of the lactic acid buildup, and you just have to kind of get through it. But sometimes you'll see a runner and they're so smooth, and it's beautiful to watch. It's one of my favorite things to watch still, just that it's poetry in motion to me. Before I started dance, that was just my ultimate like movement perfection, when somebody running a difficult race still looked smooth and effortless. And so paying attention to their running style and realizing that there is a lot you can do to the way that you run. There's still technique involved. You can still milk it. You can still get a lot out of the way you run so that it becomes easier. It feels better when you land in a certain way, when again your head is centered over your body. You're not using extra energy and extra muscle activation for extraneous things that you don't need. So you become this efficient machine, running and just feeling great, enjoying it, and then being good at the same time. So that was like my ultimate performance goal, where when you win a race and you can barely breathe, and then actually like get a cold for the next week because your sinuses have all just sort of been maxed out. Like everything you've maxed out, you can barely walk. Like there's that type of racing, but then you run the same time, but in it feels easier. That is the magic to me of track and field, or any sport that requires, you're doing something repetitive, but then you find an ease in it. And that translates into things like strength training, like doing a same workout with the same weight, but you come back and that weight feels easier. You're no longer struggling. And it has a lot to do with finding the efficiency in the movement. It has almost um, like magic. It has nothing to do necessarily with like building a bigger muscle or like developing new all of a sudden new muscle fibers. Like that's not likely, but from one practice to the next, all of a sudden the run or the weightlifting exercise feels easier. It has a lot to do with efficiency, technique, body awareness, movement quality. All of a sudden, you've realigned your body in a way that allows you to recruit less muscles to do things that don't matter, and more of your muscles are now focused on getting you to that result. So the magic of track and field was held my attention for a long time. However, I realized like I'm, kind of definitely maxing out, my technique and efficiency and conditioning, and like, there's only so much I can do there, because you are only trying to do one thing, which is run around one distance, which is, Mike is like 400 meters. And then, there's only so much you can do. And then you kind of want to do more. And so that's where I started ballet at 22. I've tried ballet as a kid in Russia when I was like 8. And I showed up to one class and they hit me. They made fun of my outfit. And for some reason I came back one more time. They hit me again. I was like, okay, you know what? This isn't going to work. Like it was a completely normal like way of disciplining kids to get them to get better at ballet. I can't imagine that working, but as we know, Russia is pretty good at ballet. So in any case, I did not stick with it when I was a kid, but I always wanted to do it. And what fascinated me there was, again, when you look at somebody doing ballet, you can try to copy their movements, but you're never going to look like that. What is it that the professional dancers have that I don't have? I wanted to know what that thing was, because you tell me exactly what to do. You give me the exact choreography. So in ballet, there's a codified set of movements that everybody sort of learns, and then you put them into a piece of choreography, and then you perform that piece. But there's so much nuance, and um, there's so many options that you can input your own artistic beauty into the performance. You actually have a lot of options within this rigid structure, the seemingly rigid structure. So everybody's speaking the same language. So the moves are known, and then they're put all into a performance that is, up to the choreographer, and then the dancer performs those movements that are given to the dancer, and the dancer can now express themselves artistically through the movements, even though the movements are not even chosen by them, but there's still a lot of expression that they can input into that performance. So that is amazing to me. So I wanted to know, okay, even if I understand the movements, my movement quality is nowhere near those who have been practicing ballet for years. So what is it? What is it? So I wanted that nugget. I wanted to find how can I look more like them, not in terms of body type, which again, my body type was definitely not ballet like, but it was just that if I can't have that, right? So I'm not a natural, classical ballerina, right? But I wanted to understand their movement quality and how can I participate in this? How can I be part of it and look good on stage, right? Like I wanted to perform and I wanted to figure out how can I, given the set of movements, find that ease of movement, that movement quality, and not look like I'm struggling because the movements are difficult. This is the other thing. These are all difficult, but like unlike track and field and lifting weights, my face cannot show how difficult this is because we're supposed to look pleasant and it's supposed to look effortless. And you're also trying to express something, you're trying to tell a story. So it has nothing to do with how hard you're working. You're definitely not supposed to show how hard the technique that you're performing is, which is again very interesting because you have to build on so much foundation to even get to that point. You have to understand all of these different nuanced movements that are actually taking you completely out of your natural way of moving. There's a certain way to hold your posture, there's a certain way to hold your arms and to turn out your feet, and it's all very different. You have to like really own that, and then you have to find the ease and the efficiency in it, and then you have to show up and perform it and look, be able to express yourself and look effortless. So there's a lot there, and I feel like within the first 2 years I was nowhere near figuring that out. It took me about 2 years to finally have a little bit of a click to see like, okay, there's actually a body alignment that allows me to find that movement quality, that ease, that efficiency. So it took me many years, and then that's where I was already in the kinesiology PhD program, thinking about biomechanics and kind of thinking a lot about body alignment. But it has a lot to do with just kinesthetic awareness, like just being aware of my body in space. And that just was so interesting to me because there's infinite possibilities. So you give the same movement to two different people, they're going to look completely different because there's just your body carries this history, especially when you start things as an adult. Young kids all sort of have this moldable quality, and when you coach kids, it's a lot easier almost because they're a lot more open and they don't have years and years of certain movements built up in their body. And I think that's also fascinating because I started at 22, but I asked the artistic director to allow me to take class with the kids, the 11 to 13-year-olds. And I did. And I was, of course, the odd one out. And I was fine because the way they teach kids is completely different from the way they teach adults. Because adults can comprehend things and kids need more repetition and just more experiencing the movement. You can't explain it to them. They have to do it, and then they have, the teacher corrects them and so on. So there's just a different approach to it. And I was lucky to experience both, which helped me ultimately get better. But again, when you give two adults the same movement, ask them to do the same movement, they will look very different because, one is a computer engineer who spends a lot of time sitting at the computer. And the other one is, say, a construction worker who spends a lot of time lifting heavy things and, walking around, standing, whatever. It's very different body histories, body movement mechanics and histories. And so you ask them to do the same thing, they're going to do that thing very differently. They're going to look different and so on. And so, is there one correct way to do a thing? Well, when it comes to, so I've said in track and field, it appears that the better the runners are, the more similar they're doing the running. Like their technique in running is very similar to each other. In ballet, that question falls away completely because there's only one correct way to do the thing, and everybody has to do it correctly. If you want to go up on stage and you be all together and everybody looks the same and the same in the same choreography, right? Like that was the key part. So there's no question. There's only one correct way to do the technique, which was interesting to me because then you have to mold your body to fit that technique rather than molding that technique to your body. Like that's a completely different paradigm shift. So before it's like, well, whatever you need to do, that's fine, just like your body is how it is, and then whatever you need to do. And here it's, this is the technique and you need to do it right, and you have to look good doing it, and easy and efficient, and so on. So while there are certain body limitations that I have, the movement quality is something that is accessible to everyone to look like a dancer. So it's something that people say, I'm not a dancer. Well, sure, like I don't have the hips for dance. I don't have certain things for ballet, for classical ballet, but I certainly can achieve a similar movement quality when it comes to the movements. I don't have to have my leg up next to my ear, but I can still have that same essence of dance in my body. That is what drew me to that. And the rigidity of it was, of course, difficult and ultimately, hurt. I hurt a couple of things like my hips and knees. But I learned a lot about my body alignment. And then I started Brazilian Jiu Jitsu the week I defended my dissertation in my PhD in kinesiology. I started Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I signed up that week to my local gym and spent, I really got into it, and I always go all in on all of these movement practices because once I'm fascinated, it's over. So I spent, 6 days a week training, just like I did ballet. I fully committed to Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And I experienced other grappling art forms as well. I tried judo. I loved wrestling. And then I also tried like Aikido. There's so many different grappling styles, but ultimately the unification is, okay, you need to get to the result. One thing you cannot do is strike. And there's some other rule sets depending on what grappling style you're doing. But ultimately, your goal is to submit or to get a dominant position against your opponent, your partner, your grappling partner. So there's so many external factors involved. And it does not matter at all how you get there. It doesn't have to look a certain way whatsoever, right? You have a goal. You have to get a submission or you have to get a dominant position. And it's like a game. And however you get to that result is great. Whatever it takes to get there is great. It doesn't have anything to do with your body type or how you moved or how difficult it felt or whatever. It's just like you have so many options. It's almost mind-boggling. So it's completely different than, in track and field, you have no external factors. You have maybe the weather, right? But you have to run around a circle and that's it. In ballet, you have a known set of movements that you have to perfect, and that's it. And then here it's like, well, whatever it is that you want to do is fine. There's some rules, but they're like very minimal. Like relatively speaking, they're non-existent. And it doesn't matter, your hip doesn't move this way, that's fine. Try something else. Like this move doesn't work for you, try something else. The bottom line is getting the submission, getting a dominant position against your opponent while they're trying to do the same to you. So there's this huge other factor where you're going against an opponent directly, right? And they're trying to submit you. They're trying to dominate the position on you. And you're trying to do the same. So there's that whole factor. And then you have all of these options of how to get there. And that was like a big paradigm shift for me because I'm like, well, just tell me what to do. I'll do it. Like that's been my movement history, is just tell me what to do and I'll do it. I'll figure it out. But there's a lot more to it than that. And there was that factor of give it a try, see how it works. If it works for you, keep it. It's up to you. Like everything is up to me, right? I mean, again, somebody's trying to kill me at the same time, but how I get out of it, how I deal with it, that's up to me. So it gives you a lot of freedom and a lot of ownership over your own body as somebody's actively trying to choke you or break your arm or leg. But nevertheless, like you have a lot of control over how you move. And that was the next level of fascination for me because, oh my gosh, I have way too many choices. And that forced me to start trying things because you have to try it and see if it feels easy, right? And if that felt easy, that's probably a good thing to keep if it got you to the result that you wanted. It's kind of like this paradigm shift is like, I'm going to try this. Well, now, this feels terrible, and my legs hurt, and I feel like I'm pushing against a wall. Well, don't do that, right? If you move your hips a certain way, does this become easier? Yes. Okay, let's see where this goes. And this is this constant. It's very much like play, but also like there's a lot of, so you kind of know some techniques, but for the technique to work for you, you still have to figure out, okay, I can shift my hips this way, I can move my knee into this direction. And it's like there's just like a lot of dials that you can twist and a lot of nuances that you can work on to make that technique work for you. How much freedom you're given. It's amazing, which is almost like overwhelming at the beginning. So, again, there was about 2 years that seems to, for me, where things click, right? The first 2 years, you're just kind of like, oh my God, so many things, even though I have a lot of movement knowledge and biomechanics knowledge and kinesthetic awareness. Like I had a lot going for me, but at the same time, like just the sheer amount of information and lack of kind of like somebody telling me exactly what I need to do. Like they're telling me, try this technique. This is an option. It's like, okay, great. Just tell me what to do. So that is overwhelming. And so in about 2 years, just roughly speaking, like it started to click, of just consistently trying different things. And then it's like, your body starts to accept your body. When you turn on the body awareness muscle, your body starts to sort of notice, okay, this seems to work really well, this definitely not, right? And it's like when I can get to a more dominant position with ease, then it's like I really own that technique. When I can get a submission with ease, when somebody's actually resisting against me, but it still feels like, a lot more easy, when I'm maneuvering around them and I'm trying to, again, we have the same goal, my opponent and I, but when it feels easy and I reach my goal first and it feels efficient, then you really like put that away in the back of your mind and then use that later, right? Like that is the learning process of where you're trying different things and then something that feels good, efficient, sleek, easy, fast, that's what you put away in your subconscious, and then you can retrieve it later. So again, it's a learning process, and that learning process really benefits from that conscious awareness of what is working. So I love that concept. So now let's take that concept and apply it to literally any movement at all, right? So you're going to the gym and you're doing push-ups, and push-ups feel terrible and difficult, which they are. They're not an easy exercise. There's a lot to do in the push-up. Okay, so for a push-up, you notice that if I, don't do anything different, like, I have neck pain and it's just kind of, what if I change the way my body is aligned? What if I try push-ups with a different body alignment? Try that. Does that feel easier or harder? So if the same movement, like a push-up, becomes easier after you've tweaked your alignment, well, take that and use that again, right? Why wouldn't you want your push-ups to be more efficient? Because then you can do more push-ups and you can start adding weight to your push-ups or whatever. That applies to everything. Like if you're going out for a walk and every time you walk, you notice pain in the knee, right? Like my knee hurts every time I go for a walk. Well, what if we tweak how you roll through your feet? What if we tweak how your head is sitting on top of your body? What if we talk about how you're swinging your arms? Are you swinging your arms? What feels better, to swing your arms or not to swing your arms when you're walking? Doing that little bit of experimentation allows you to be like, okay, this one feels easier, this one feels worse. Then you take that and you use that again. And then you keep getting more and more efficient throughout. It's a little switch of body awareness that you use during very minor, nuanced movement explorations. And you literally notice a difference between two different types of movements. So again, taking all of the things that I've learned from track and field, ballet, and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, I found that just little tweaks and movement experiments is exactly what allows me to progress in these movements and in literally any other movement style. Again, walking, running, lifting weights, picking up my baby off the floor. Even when I'm driving and it's like I'm feeling stiff, I'll change my position, right? If I change my position, does that help me? Well, yeah, that feels a little better. That feels a little easier. Okay, great. Like there's always something you can do. You're never stuck in the same position. Even with a rigid movement structure like ballet, you always still have options of how you position yourself to achieve a more efficient or an easier way of movement, a smoother way of movement. You always have that option. And even if you have somebody trying to kill you and trying to choke you as you're trying to do the same to them, you have in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, not in the street fight, but you always have the option of experimentation and trying to find an easier way to get to the same outcome, whether it is to run faster around in a circle, whether it is to perform the same set of choreography, whether it is to get a submission or a dominant position in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu or wrestling or whatever, or when you're lifting weights and you're finding that this is really out of my comfort zone, this is really difficult, is there a way you can make it easier on yourself, literally by tweaking your body position, body alignment, muscle activation, turning on that body awareness? And actually, that really applies to when you are feeling those chronic injuries. So you're feeling those little nagging injuries whenever you're moving, and you turn on that body awareness, check that switch, and you see, if I move my leg differently, will this help my knee? If I activate my arch, will that help my knee? Yes. If I position my head in a different spot, will it help my shoulder pain? Yes. So it's the experimentation that you have to do to convince your body to then change its approach. It's almost like you turn on a little bit of that conscious effort for you to then experiment and note it down, and then you can use it again and again, and it can help you expand the way you move with ease, efficiency, smoothness, and ease. It's all about that movement quality that you can then take anywhere and then reduce the pain that you feel, those aches and pains that are, constantly bothering you. They could go away if you start paying attention to how you move throughout the day. So there's a lot there, but ultimately I've really enjoyed my journey because I feel like I've lived multiple lifetimes from trying the different movement disciplines and really going deep into them, and then having combined all of my experience into understanding that body of awareness and movement quality is the way to progressing faster and reducing aches and pains, and also taking that into your workouts to get really any result that you want with respect to your body.